Yeah. That would explain.
Okay.
But did you see the don't deal with that? But we deal with confidence in the inspiring counsel. Makes sense.
Right, I think we're good to start.
Are we good? All right. Simon, did you recess after
Yes, we did. We did adjourn.
Yeah.
oh wait, so
We adjourned the,
In-camera.
yeah, we
Right.
adjourned the in-camera.
all right, so you finished the in-camera. So did you recess when you came out of the in-camera?
Not technically.
Oh wait, so then we're still in the meeting.
Yes.
So we're still in the meeting then. That's perfect. Good. So we move on to why do we not have an item 3.1? We move on to item 3, rather disclosure of interest. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest with anything that is likely to arise on the agenda this evening? Seeing and hearing none, we move on to item 4.1, the approval of the agenda. We have a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Be it resolved that the agenda for the June 26th regular board meeting be approved as written. Yes, President Lettieri? I cannot hear you.
Can we just amend the agenda to put the staff reports at the start of this agenda, starting with the Director of Communications and Strategy?
Yes, yep. We can, if there's, are there any opposed to moving staff presentations to item 6? We'll go through agenda and minutes and then, and to reorder them. What would have been 8.3.
Reorder 8.3 with 8.1.
I will throw that in as a.
And I suppose get rid of, or I suppose Dustin will read for it.
Mr. Chair, I will, I guess for the sake of record keeping, just for that amendment, just reorder it to be B45A. For convenience, about reshuffling the agenda.
Sure. Sure, we can move. Yeah, that would work. I believe we can also simply move to deal with item 8 first, item 8.3 first, and then follow the agenda as written. If that's easier. So that would be after the approval of the agenda, we would move to suspend the rules and we would deal with item 8, which would probably be faster than amending the agenda. Did everyone catch that?
Yeah.
Okay, so in that case, we can move to approve the agenda and then we can just have a motion to suspend the rules. Does that work for everyone? Perfect. So we need a mover and a seconder for the motion to approve the agenda. Do we have one? I moved by President Lettieri and seconded by Director Harris. Be it resolved that the agenda for the June 26th regular board meeting be approved as written. Is there any discussion on the matter? Seeing none, we can do this by unanimous consent. Are there any opposed to the agenda as written? Seeing nothing, that is passed by unanimous consent. A motion would now be in order to suspend the rules. I will make that motion. Actually, I move to suspend the rules of the day and deal with item 8 first, specifically 8.3, and then following through the list as written. Do we have a seconder for that? Seconded by President Lettieri. Am I going too fast for you, Lily?
No.
Perfect. All right, we have a motion to suspend the rules, moved by myself, seconded by President Lettieri, to deal with item 8 on the agenda first, specifically 8.3. We can do this by unanimous consent. Are there any opposed? Hearing none, we move on to item 8.3, which is Christine Farlardo, Director of Communications and Strategy, for your report. Is that correct, Christine? Is that how I pronounce your last name?
Yes, little bit, it's Falardo, but you're
Falardo.
close enough. Yeah. You're better than the telemarketers that call me, so I appreciate that. Okay, so I've been really working for, it's very nice to meet you all in person, if some of you have had a chance to meet, so I'm glad to be here. I'm not sure how these reports have been given in the past, so I'm just gonna kind of jump into it, and if you have any questions about anything, feel free to ask. So just starting at the top, some summary of some recent accomplishments and current activities. So we've recently grown the communications department and hired a full-time graphic and multimedia designer. Previously, that was a student role. We also hired a student social media coordinator in May, that for the purpose of managing the social media presence for the Cusa businesses. Also a role that didn't exist before, and this was something that the managers were tasked with. We felt that there was a need to bring somebody in, especially a student, to manage that. The next, I'm working with Adil to audit all the IT for our offices, and we're putting through a big IT order, so we're upgrading people's workstations. Doing some interior branding work for Haven at Work, so everything you see, this is all work that I've been doing slowly over time, but next meeting you'll see it'll look even more different. Next, creating some remaining content for the new website for Haven, which is going to be launched, I believe, fingers crossed, next week. So that's going to be still our bookstore, but there's going to be some other content on that site as well. And I'm also working on a Cusa Club's website upgrade with our student groups administrator, Hannah. Aside from that, also working on all of our big promotional order that goes for association-wide throughout the entire year. So that's stuff like, branded materials, staff uniforms, things like that. And also working on a wayfinding signage plan for the UC. Some upcoming activities is we're building another new website. That's the theme this summer for me, websites. For the co-working space itself, so that all of the event bookings and all the co-working bookings will be managed strictly from that site. I'm also working on optimizing a lot of the processes that we have in the communications department, having grown our team recently. We're finding the need to look over the way we've done things before and constantly improve them. And I'm also tasked with upgrading a lot of our office spaces, common spaces in particular. So boardrooms, things like that. Having new staff joining us, they've also requested new furniture for their offices. So working on putting together a list of accessible office furniture. Financial impact, the website development and build costs, that all has financial impact. All that's built into those particular departments' budgets. So working with that. The IT and hardware and office furniture order is something that we're hoping to send to the AFCOM, the Accessibility Fund Committee, for review and hopefully approval. But aside from that, there's no other financial impacts to share. Anybody have any questions about anything? Great, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Yeah, I live far away, so I appreciate everybody, amending the agenda because I have 45 minute drive to go home at home. And that's what that.
So that's ownership. When you talk, because you can speed a little bit. But
Pardon?
I think you can get away with speeding a little bit. It's off.
Yeah, exactly. I know how to do that.
Thank you, Christine. Again, apologies for it taking 2 hours for us to get through the in-camera portion. I did not anticipate that. So we can move on then to item 8.1. If Adil Tassin, Director of Student Services. Adil, if you're here, you can go ahead.
Point of order.
Oh, yep.
The amendment that was passed. So we be going through the rest of the agenda.
No, I requested that. I requested that all staff reports be brought to the top in case anybody needs to leave.
Okay.
Let me just find the actual motion. Yep, item 8.3, and then follow through the list as written. So, yeah. The intent of the motion was to do staff reports first.
Okay.
I don't suppose it deals in the waiting room.
Anastasia?
He's not.
Yeah.
I messaged him as well.
That's the deal here. Would anyone like me to read his report, or would we just like to move forward? He
It's
has-
a technology.
So,
Everyone has reviewed it, so.
yep, exactly. Item 8.2 is a report from our Director of Finance and Administration, Anish Tiberius Murali. Is that correct? The correct pronunciation?
It is. It is.
Perfect. I just let the record show that Director Jaju Yakub is leaving the meeting. So thank you. And Director of Finance and Administration, over to you.
I'm wondering if I should just read the report, or if there are any specific questions regarding the report I can answer. What's the proper format?
Sort of up to you if you'd like to read your report and expand on anything, and then have ask for questions afterwards.
Well, a great deal of my my work in the last 3 weeks has been onboarding with regards to financial matters, and of course building the HR department from the ground up, since we really did not have one in the past. I've been in regular meetings with the former director of finance, which we have retained on a contractual basis, a consulting basis, and she's been very helpful, Lisa Yu. I've also been meeting with all the student leaders, the executives, and the president, along with the departmental heads, for touch point conversations to see how they would interact with finance and HR in the past, and to see how we can service their particular needs. I've also been meeting with the VP Finance for budget generation, and of course the new budget model that we are sort of in the idea stage and the propagation stage, where meetings are happening this week, initial meetings this week and next week, and then final meetings at the end of the month before a full-fledged budget for the organization is presented to the board in September. That is the timeline that the VP of Finance has charged me with, and that is the direction that we're moving in. I've also been a secondary consultant for the current audit. Primarily, it is the former director of finance, Lisa Yu, and our finance staff, Jean and Hira, were working with the auditors. But I'm also involved on the back and forth conversations concerning that. So it's definitely giving me an appreciation for the amount of complexity that exists within Cusa's financial systems. I've also been reviewing human resources and finance policy documents. I'm trying to aggregate and collate information concerning all HR and finance documents into policies into one document, so that it would be a resource for the board as well, to see where it can pick up on elements that have not yet been fully flushed out or requires more conversation. We've also, through the support of the finance committee subcommittee, shifted over and created a new, or rather initiated a new accounting software system. So we are currently using New Views, and for those of you who have ever used that accounting platform, it's quite limited in its functionalities, and I noticed that in my first 3 weeks, and therefore we are shifting towards QuickBooks in order to manage our accounting systems. There is the possibility of also shifting our payroll software system to one that is more robust and able to pivot to our organizational needs. And so that's also under review by my portfolio. So yeah, those are the things that I've been up to in the last 3 weeks. It's been a very busy last 3 weeks getting onboarded, and of course learning the organization and meeting each and every one of you. There are still some faces I've yet to meet in person that I look forward to meeting in the future. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I'll defer back to the chair.
Thank you very much, Tib. I'm looking forward to working with you as well. I know I've been in contact for the board nominating committee, and looking forward to moving forward with that. Moving on to item 8.4, Sam Kilgore, Director of Student Development. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Greg. So yeah, I didn't get to submit a written update as I was on vacation. It was lovely. I do have some things to update you on. I'll run through them fairly briefly. So the office on UC floor 5, room 513 is finally fully staffed. And everybody is on board, which has been a long time coming. Hannah Whale started in April as the student groups administrator after a lengthy vacancy in that role. And Hannah was familiar to Cusa, so the onboarding was mainly clubs and societies specific. While there was a lot, it was relatively seamless. Abby Simpson started in June in the events and programming coordinator role after a brief vacancy. That's where Hannah had come from. So it was a couple months that role was vacant. Abby is new to Cusa, so learning not only events and programming, also learning Cusa. And I'll say all three of us as an office are all learning what it's like to program on the university campus in person. Hannah has some of that experience as a student, but otherwise all three of us are new to Cusa during the pandemic. So there's some new stuff there. Passing along some notes from those two. Summer clubs funding, the amount for that came out around $4,200 for summer funding for clubs, which is roughly equivalent to what it was last year. There was no summer funding the year before that. And these two staff are really supporting the executive and committees on things like Fall O, club certification, clubs recertification, and they're also supporting the university on Fall O and Expo, specifically as a part of Fall O. So as I mentioned, we're all working our way through some of these in-person processes for the first time, learning various university forms and standards, some of which have been heavily reformed even since what was going on before the pandemic. So sometimes we don't even have the historical knowledge within Cusa because things have changed. The other update I have is Hannah has become our point person for the club accounts at Scotiabank, the club bank accounts at Scotiabank. And having her with the time to dedicate to the administration has already yielded really good results, especially as our longtime club's contact person with Scotiabank. That person has moved on from Scotiabank. So Hannah has become the continuity there. Some conversations about Scotiabank have been escalated, but it's always been nice to have Hannah at an administrative level satisfying the clubs. Other than that, the chief returning job is posted and closes on August 15th. We've had a little bit of traction already in that regard, and as of today, it's being promoted on LinkedIn, or anyway, it's money's being put into recruiting. Yeah, on LinkedIn. So that's what I have for you for now. Any questions? I'm open to questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sam. I hope you had a restful vacation. It long overdue, I'm sure. Moving on, our final report will be from Dustin Rivers, our executive director, who we can't see. Just so you know, Dustin, we can't see you. So
that's okay. I don't need to be seen. I'm not that pretty. Hey, folks, I got a haircut. I don't know which side of the park's supposed to be on. Everything that just been said to some degree or another, some things far more than others. Working with Scotiabank in general to improve our banking situation has been an interesting learning curve and challenge. Definitely working on that. In terms of projects that you are specifically aware of that are ongoing that might be of particular interest to you, the fees and service agreement is still a work in progress. We're currently working with Mackenzie Lake on our next response, employing a bit of a different strategy to try and move it along. You know, without getting into the weeds, it's been also a situation that I think has highlighted in a number of areas where the relationship with the university has been in some degree, I hesitate to use the word deficient, but cumbersome. And so been working with Jeremy, who's been, who is now the associate VP at the university, who's been quite receptive to collaboration on some of these issues that have kind of been more long-standing to improve just the sheer administration and things like ordering tables, working through eShop, stuff like that. So those are something that we're working towards. Those are all historical issues that, nobody seems to know why they exist, but most people seem to agree that there's an appetite to improve on diligently in that regard. The union agreement is at a slight standstill due to back-to-back holidays by their bargaining team, along with a change in their bargaining leadership at QP. So that kind of delayed the process, and right now we are waiting for a counter proposal back from the union in terms of our next steps for consideration in that regard. But those are, aside from everything you already know that I've been working on, those are things that have not been discussed already or that you would not be aware of. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Dustin. If there are no questions for any of our members of staff, again, apologies for the in-camera session taking as long as it did. I did not anticipate that. So thank you for sticking with us so that you could give your reports. We move back to the regular orders of the day, and item 5, the approval of our past minutes. So if I can find.
I'm going to use this natural pause to just step out and thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you at the meeting.
Thank you, Christine. Have a-
Thanks, Christine.
Thank you. You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
No, that's
That's not my bag. I'm sure they would appreciate you taking it.
Oh.
I mean, I only did a bunch in it, so you go for it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
All righty. I believe public meeting minutes were circulated. I unfortunately also didn't get them until late. Has everyone had a chance to have a look at those? Or at least see that they've gotten them in your inbox? If anyone doesn't feel they've adequately had the chance, we can take a 5-minute recess. We may want to take a 5-minute recess here anyway. I'll gauge the board. Would you?
It's like a tough decision because I would really appreciate a break, but on the other hand, I'm taking away another 5 minutes. Yeah.
Exactly. I know. Would you rather just plow through? Personally, I'm happy to just plow through. So if everyone's happy, we'll move on with item 5.1, the motion to approve past minutes. Be it resolved that the past minutes for the June 26th regular board meeting be approved as written. We need a mover and a seconder. Do we have those? Moved by President Lettieri. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Director Harris. There we go. All right. Is there any discussion, any additions, deletions, or corrections to those minutes as circulated? Hearing none, we have a motion moved by President Lettieri, seconded by Director Harris to approve the past minutes. Be it resolved that the past minutes for the June 26th regular board meeting be approved as written. We can do that by unanimous consent. Are there any opposed? Seeing none opposed to approving that, they are so approved. Moving on to item 6, presentations and delegations. Item 6.1 is a presentation by President Stoikos Lettieri on executive orders 2 through 5. The floor, Madam President, is yours.
I just have a question because I know that you mentioned that the agenda subcommittee be a good idea for me to just give us a short review. Do we still want that, or is it okay do we prefer board members to review on their own? This is really just review.
How's that? Madam President?
Okay, I'll just read it.
I don't think
It's fine. Okay, so the first executive order that we passed for a time off request, essentially this puts into policy our current procedure until more formal policy is drafted. For example, this order indicates timeframes for notifying direct supervisors, etc. The second order that we passed was clarification of executive portfolios. Essentially, relevant staff and executives must be consulted based on their portfolio if the motion is going to council. Without consultation and or agreeableness, the individual must clearly indicate that they are bringing the motion as a student at large and not as an officer of the association. The third one is communication with the university administration. Essentially, this streamlines communication with the university senior administration between only the president as agreed to with the university, not including the connections that they have with the executive director. Anyways, the fourth one is the comments to news media. Essentially, all staff must send news media requests to the president, who will then send recommendations for response. And if those recommendations are not followed, the staff member must indicate they are not responding on behalf of Cusa, rather personally. So that's like a little summary. That's all.
Perfect. Are there any questions for the president on those executive orders? Seeing none, we can move on to item 7, director reports. Does any director have anything they would like to report to the board? Seeing none, we've already dealt with item 8. We can move on to item 9 as a tractor rolls past the library. We can move on to item 9, committee reports. 9.1 is Director Huggins Charles, the chair of the Finance and Governance Subcommittee. Director Huggins Charles, the floor is yours.
Well, the Finance and Governance Subcommittee met last month with a number of items referred to us by the board, as well as proposals brought to the subcommittee that we went through. Well, firstly, we received an update from the VPF concerning the creation of budgets and other items that he currently working on. We also received a proposal from the Director of Finance and Administration concerning migrating Cusa's accounting software to QuickBooks on a trial basis for the rest of this current fiscal year, which we approved. We also voted to bring 2 motions with a recommendation to approve to the board, being to sponsor CU Spiritly, as well as a motion to approve a joint review of presidential compensation. We'll probably just get into that more when those motions actually come up. We're still working on reviewing the draft compensation policy and the operating capital budget approval policy and procedure. Just because, well, concerning compensation policy, the BPI asked for more time before he sent it to us, and concerning the budget approval, the committee just wanted more time to review it before bringing a recommendation. And hope to bring recommendations on those policies for the fall meeting. The last thing was a proposal brought by the executive director that I think we wanted to also bring up to the board for the discussion concerning our current budget cycle and how we create our budgets. So currently, the budgets for Cusa are created after a new executive is elected, which creates a problem in the sense that the new VPI doesn't have much experience with Cusa's finances, then has to create an entire budget for the organization. That is an enormous hurdle for one person to have to deal with, as well as was pointed out by the executive director. During that transition period, the organization is operating without a budget, which is another problem. So it was proposed by Dustin that we make a change where the outgoing BPF is given the responsibility of creating the budget for the next fiscal year, and the incoming BPF will be, well, through mentorship with the Director of Finance, manage that budget, and then at the end of their tenureship, they continue creating a budget for the next fiscal year. The reason we wanted the discussion was that there was two things. Firstly, because of the operating capital budget stuff, since that would mean that those, but because of that policy, because it means we would have longer term budgets. I believe the operating budget would be for 3 years and the capital budget would be for 10 years.
There's provisions
Yeah.
somewhere that say that.
Yeah,
which are in that.
I think it would make the need to change how we create budgets sort of redundant, as well as if we were to make any changes, it would have to involve changing finance, the BPF's terms of reference. Because I believe in their terms of reference, it specifically says they're responsible for creating a budget for the current fiscal year. So yeah, I think that's the need to.
No, that's a fairly good summary. It's just the current situation puts the organization at an operational disadvantage. The second element of it all is that's something that Ted is taking on is building a budget that can be passed forward and is consistent from year to year. Because right now, if you go through the past operating budgets of the organization, every single one is different in the structure, in how they line up the document. So stuff like that makes comparing year-to-year performance very difficult, right? It's like comparing apples to oranges in some respects. And so with the addition, with the change in budgeting cycle, you're going to improve the operational capacity of the organization and make sure that, you know, every instance is covered. And then with further changes that are also coming or being proposed, you're also going to have a budget that you'll be able to use and carry forward on an annual basis, and therefore provide necessary annual comparisons. So that was why I was bringing that. I thought that it would be an appropriate action for the board to take.
Director of Finance and Administration.
I want to echo what Dustin has said in this particular change. Currently, we are in the current fiscal year without a budget. We're approaching September, which is the first quarter ending without an active budget. So this new change will allow for conversations about the new budget cycle for the following fiscal year to happen in January and February, giving us enough time to be able to build the budget so that it can be enacted by the board before the new fiscal year begins in May. So the timelines will be more appropriate operationally. It will allow for greater conversation and flexibility rather than it being rushed. And it will allow for an active budget to come into force at the start of the fiscal year, so there is no confusion. It will allow for greater transparency and accountability. And it will allow the board to be able to properly scrutinize the budget in multiple or single sessions where the budget is the only topic of conversation, rather than shared with other points. So this new direction will allow for all of those things, and I strongly support it.
So do I gather then that we need a motion now to change the budget cycle, or are we simply, is this simply a notice of motion and we'll make that motion to change the budget cycle at the next board meeting?
I thought there's a motion that says.
No.
No. Oh, okay.
No, I don't think, well, we don't have a motion.
I did not receive.
Yeah, we wanted to bring it up because we wanted more direction on what to do. Consider it, since it seemed to be a major concern.
Director of Student Development?
Yeah, I'd like to review the finance policies we currently have in place. I believe they say that we should have a budget in place by the middle of March for a coming year, not for a year that is in progress. We haven't come to that yet. So, but I believe this is already in place.
It's possible. Let's check it out.
So in that case, there may not be any action from the board required. But if there is, we can treat this as notice of motion, if need be, and we can simply vote to change the budget cycle, I believe, at the next board meeting, if that works for everyone.
Yeah, no, any motions, subsequent motions after the research could be quite easily drafted. It
Perfect.
doesn't change any of the work we're doing today, so.
Perfect. So long as you can do what you're doing, that's good. Director Huggins Charles, is that concludes your report, or?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Unless there's any further discussion on the Finance and Governance Subcommittee's report, we'll move on to item 9.2, a report from the Human Resources Subcommittee given by President Stoikos Lethierry.
Okay, so there was a presentation by the executive director on the privacy working group. He will be working on this term with some other directors or other staff. I'm sure he'd be happy to loop you in if you're interested in ensuring privacy compliance for the organization. We approved a new email signature and directed the comms department to draft that template in line with our branding. Both mandatory and optional elements were passed in efforts to increase transparency and accessibility, and will apply to all staff. So, for example, some examples are optional pronunciation of your name using a program that does it. Optional pronouns, and then required key submission statement, required land acknowledgement, required confidentiality disclaimer, and an optional working hours declaration, which was interesting, which was really good. And then we approved the organizational chart amendments to reflect the new Director of Finance and Administration and Human Resource and Finance Assistant positions as they've been created and implemented. We also directed the policy analyst to draft a policy clarifying the autonomy of human resources and the financial reporting mechanisms for the Director of Finance and Administration position for review at the next Human Resources Subcommittee meeting. The Director of Finance and Administration and the Executive Director will be consulted and engaged for collaboration. They already met with the policy analyst to start working on this policy. The Human Resources Subcommittee moved to recommend the disconnecting from work policy to the board as presented. And the Human Resources Subcommittee also directed the Executive Director of Finance and Administration and the BPI to review and amend the hybrid work policy for approval by the board. We do not have a formal recommendation as we've not reviewed as a committee and have opted to allow for the board to approve or not at tonight's meeting once the policy amendments are brought forward by the board staff.
I should unmute myself first. Fabulous. If that concludes your report, are there any questions for the Human Resources Subcommittee? All right, hearing none, we're moving through everything quickly. Hearing none, we'll move on to item 12. Now on the agenda, it says correspondence from Davin Corretto, Vice President Internal. Director Harris, do you know what that's referring to?
Yes, it's referring to the Robert's rules training that we received at the beginning of this. It was a mistaken.
Yes, Chair Simmons, to recap. So the content from item 12 that's within this item. We've already discussed this at the beginning of the board meeting. Obviously, it was jammed in because it was relating to board business, but I guess it's something to just keep in mind next time. Outside of board session.
Perfect. I did have an addition actually to this section. I believe actually I tried to get it on the agenda and it simply missed the agenda. So it would be up to the board to vote on a 2/3 majority if they're willing to discuss a late item. I shared with you all the Cusa elections request for proposal responses. I believe because that's a time sensitive matter, we should probably discuss it at this point. And this would be the section to do it. If the board is willing, we'd need a vote to discuss that. So all those in favor of discussing the Cusa elections request for proposal responses, if you could raise your hands.
In favor?
In favor. All right. Is that is unanimous? I'm sorry. I know this is going on for quite a while, but at least this way we can bring it onto the agenda, get everybody familiar with it. And I believe, Director of Student Development, you may have some comments on this. I did share this with everyone. I think it's a Google Sheets. You should be able to find it. Director of Student Development, if you wouldn't mind sort of explaining what this is about.
Yeah, it's the system, we put a request for proposal out to have our voting system run by either someone consistent or someone new. So at this point, we just need the board, I think, to sanction a group of people to look over the proposals and decide which one meets our needs, is the best financial option, those types of things. I'd recommend that the Finance and Governance Subcommittee is an already formed perfect group to evaluate the proposals.
Wonderful. Is anyone opposed to a motion to refer the Cusa elections request for proposal responses to the Finance and Governance Subcommittee?
I can actually review the document.
How was that, President?
I can't actually review the document.
You can't?
No, I opened it, but I can't like review it. There's nothing in here.
Can you not see it?
No.
Right up.
Hey,
Really?
apparently I'm dealing with it later. It doesn't matter. Moving on. I just wanted to see it.
Wait. I did have a look, just speaking from my own point of view. Interesting to read over that we got 2 requests for proposals. Both interesting to read over. I would certainly be in support of referring this to the Finance and Governance Subcommittee, and I would in fact make that motion. So I would like to move a motion to refer the Cusa elections request for proposals to the Finance and Governance Subcommittee and delegate the authority, I suppose, to ask for their recommendation to the board on which group or individual we should be considering hiring. Does that sort of fulfill the needs, do we think, Sam?
I think so, yes.
So it would be Finance and Governance Subcommittee that reviews it, and then it would be the board who makes the ultimate decision, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So I'll just let Lily write the motion here. I guess we'll need a text before I can ask for a seconder, but. So I think be it resolved, the board refer the Cusa elections request for proposals to the Finance and Governance Subcommittee. Be it further resolved that the Finance and Governance Subcommittee make a recommendation before the November or by the November board meeting. All these really long words for you to write. I'm sorry, Lily.
It's all good.
If we can The only thing I'd consider changing is the at to by the November board meeting. That way, if the F&G subcommittee happens to make a recommendation earlier and we happen to meet earlier, then we can include it on an earlier agenda. Sam, do we have a timeline that this needs to be done by?
I mean, no. We're having a by-election in October, but if we need to maintain our current arrangement through that by-election, we will do that.
Okay, so by or at, that's sort of semantics, but perfect. So I would like to move the motion to refer the Cusa elections request for proposals to the Finance and Governance Subcommittee and give them the power to recommend an option to the board. Be it resolved that the board refer the Cusa elections request for proposals to the Finance and Governance Subcommittee, and be it further resolved that the Finance and Governance Subcommittee provide a recommendation to the board by the November board meeting. Do we have a seconder for this motion? I believe that's Director Matthews, whose hand I saw first. All right, is there any discussion or debate on the motion? Hearing none, we can move into voting procedure. All those in favor, if you can raise your hands. And that is unanimous. Jody, your shirt is almost the same color as the cupboard behind it, and I almost can't see it. There we go. Perfect. All right. Moving on to item 13.1, the motion to approve the executive policy. We only have 17 things left to do, and I do appreciate it's nearing 10 o'clock there. Would anyone like a recess?
2 minutes, Gray, for me to change the Wi-Fi so it's no longer running on Sam's phone data.
Sure, I will, we can recess. Let's recess until 9:57 for 5 minutes.
Is this computer?
Or we'll recess until I call the meeting back to order is probably how that makes more sense.
I don't know if it'll fall off.
I thought we changed it.
Well, while I'm doing that, I'm going to deal with the fact that I think my mother has locked herself out of her truck in Kamloops. So.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, it's driving crazy.
It's driving. Thank you.
Okay, so this is that.
Yeah, I think so.
So recording everything.
I think we're both.
Right. Yeah.
No, go
Now,
on.
are we in recess now?
Yeah.
Technically.
Okay.
He's gonna go deal with his mom's trunk apparently.
Should you talk about recess and make Simon the chair, the temporary chair?
But I'm not. I have no say in the matter.
I believe it would be a 2/3 majority vote.
Okay, I move
Before that can happen, can I please fix on my end the roles of motions, because this is like,
no.
I'm sorry.
no, because, no, I need to be very honest here, I'm very overwhelmed, so can you please just give me
Yes,
1
yes.
second, thank you.
Simon, why don't you take 3 minutes?
Okay.
I'm serious.
Oh, until 9:57? Okay. Just give me 1 second. I need to.
I'm just gonna see if.
I'll just go. I hate that I sound.
Yeah, no, it's not.
You should sit
Yeah.
down.
Okay.
Oh, you have a little zip bag. I know, but HOC is great.
What's yours?
TDS.
No, you have 3 minutes. You are not on time. Stop disturbing.
TDS is.
No, it's fine. Okay.
Okay, let me let me finish. TBS is black and it's a neck name.
Yeah, mine was a green.
Yeah, so
But
we
I
have
also
different
looked
ones
at
too.
it too. No, I was faster. I had the same, yeah, I had, oh,
No,
well,
no,
not,
that
but
one,
a similar thing.
Yeah, I prefer this because I know I'm not gonna use it like that.
Oh, like the one that they gave us, it was like, it could attach to the liner, but you could also use it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah. So it was, I don't know.
I am almost done on my end.
It's versatile.
Yeah.
So I believe we would actually have to motion. Go to recess.
The
and to
motion,
delegate-
yeah.
And to delegate the acting authority, I'm not sure if that's the case.
That's gonna take the 2 minutes.
Pardon?
That's gonna take
No, I don't think so.
Yeah,
65 seconds.
okay. Just give me one second. 60 seconds. 1 minute.
Okay.
All right. Are we on the correct Wi-Fi network?
There.
Perfect.
Chair Sims, I'd just like to make a comment really quickly on behalf of any of those who are doing the back end stuff for the board right now. If we could please, for the future, next time when there are additional motions to be discussed, that we save it for new business, because it has come to the point where though we have stuck it in, it's actually created a lot of work in renumbering motions. So if we could save that for the end and make it, for instance, be 65 and 66, I can guarantee the world will not burn if we save it to the end.
Sure. My apologies, Director Harris. I had hoped that request for proposal was going to come up in announcements and correspondence. And that was technically the correct place for it to come up. And I wasn't sure whether we needed to deal with something or not. Hence the motion arose at that time. In future, though, I will make sure it comes in up at new business. Although I am fairly sure that I did send it to the agenda subcommittee several days ago. So I had hoped that it would be on the agenda.
My apologies, and for the oversight, things do happen. We are human.
Oh, absolutely. So
For the next time for clerical and administrative purposes.
sure. And my apologies, and thanks for anyone who's going through and renumbering everything. So, all right. So we're moving on to item 13.1, the motion to approve the executive policy G02. Moved by myself and seconded by President Lettieri. Whereas Cusa Council passed the executive policy G02 at the second regular Cusa Council meeting on June 27th, 2022. And whereas Cusa Board of Directors, along with Cusa Council, has been designated as a joint competent chamber for the executive policy G-02, in part due to the board's oversight and regulatory functions. Be it resolved that the executive policy G-02 be approved by the Board of Directors as written. There is Appendix 1, which links to the policy. Is there any discussion on the policy as written? Does anyone have any comments? Just to provide some context, I believe that this was sent by the Vice President internal, following as it says in the motion, getting passed by Cusa Council. All right. Is there any debate on this? Hearing no yep.
It says that, the executive council, meeting minutes need to be shared and posted on the website somewhere. I don't know if it still says that because I can't find it. But, oh, I found it, yeah, executive ownership. Okay, and no, the issue with this is that most of our executive council meeting minutes are in camera and or slash are not even getting posted. So I don't know. I just didn't realize what the intent, like the purpose of this was in the first place anyways, but like essentially it's just extra work for me because I am the one that's ending up having to post all and or like make them get posted. So, and it's just like, it's all in camera, so I don't understand why we would even be posting like a document that says in on the website. And you know, that's just my 2 cents.
Executive Director, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure, Anastasia, for clarity, this is the policy that dictates.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I do have a challenge, like I do have some concerns with the nature of this policy from a purely functional perspective. So the intent, the meetings that these minutes are referring to are originally were the informal meetings that the senior staff and the executive would have to discuss a variety of different things that are going on. An operational meeting, and the meetings have now turned not into, like, the intent of the meeting has been lost due to the introduction of Robert's rules, minute taking, and the need to post this to the website. Like, in a lot of instances, organizations need to have conversations between the individuals charged with doing certain things in order to do the business that they've been charged with doing. And now, wait a second, so we had an informal meeting that everybody thought was a good idea, and somebody has decided to turn them into an official process. And that just, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
well, yeah, we just got rid of how frequently they were being done. Now we just even meet infrequently.
Director Harris?
Considering the fact that, as we have discussed before here, section 20 of the policy is acting as an hindrance to the day-to-day operations of the association, it is coming to the point where I would not be shocked if it at some point becomes a privacy concern as well, the contents that are being discussed.
Well, it's not even, it wouldn't even privacy.
President Lettieri, not your turn.
Either
Director
way,
Harris?
Again,
Yeah, sorry,
possibility.
connected to what you're saying, but sorry.
Director Harris?
To yield back my time, I would suggest that we that amendment, if is okay with sorry, I just have to check right now if it's okay with you, Chair Sims, that we amend your motion, the friendly amendment, to strike
No, this is the wrong section.
to strike section. Let's get the exact section.
And you don't have to ask me. The motion now belongs to the board. It does not belong to me anymore.
Okay, I would like to suggest that including 15. Has fit, okay, this is just a question to
So
staff.
yes, 15.1. Every meeting of the executive council shall be public and attendance may be offered.
Director or Chair Sims.
Yes.
Chair Sims, quick question, through you to the executive director. Have you found that both the, and to Director Sudfeld, whoever is supposed to answer this, have you found that 15.1 and 15.2, both taking agenda and the minutes, have been a hindrance to the operation of the association?
No, we typically have an agenda for the meeting. That's not an unreasonable thing for us to do. In fact, generally prior to, we would run the meetings, simply, we would have a collaborative agenda. People were invited to add things to the agenda. We would go, we'd sit down, we do an action item review, we go through our agenda list, and somebody generally is designated to take a speaker list in those meetings. Historically, that person has been Anastasia or Sam.
So in that case, Chair Sims, I would like to move an amendment that the Cusa Board of Directors strike section 15.2 from the executive policy G-02.
All right. We have a motion on the floor. Lily, did you catch that?
Some of it.
Perfect.
Would you like me to-
Director Harris, if you wouldn't mind just repeating that.
I can even type it in. Be it resolved that the Cusa Board of Directors strike section 15.2.
We don't need to actually indicate Cusa Board. Be it resolved that the text.
Exactly.
I don't know what this is.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I want Chairston to recognize me, that's all.
Yep.
But I don't know if I.
You- You continue to have the floor to speak about your amendment.
Chair Sims, I'd like to yield my time to Director.
So, council's already adopted this, it's in place. I'm actually willing to defend the policy as it's written. And if there's stuff that we need to assess, if it needs to be removed, I wouldn't assess it live in a board meeting.
I would agree. Probably our best option is to either pass it and then ask for it to be reviewed, or to not pass it and refer it back to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee, which would then go back through both board and council.
Can we do that?
Right, that option would be best. So I will rescind my motion then.
Okay.
Completely, and I guess in that case, presenting the motion to exactly that.
Refer it back to the
Yeah.
CCRC.
So this would now be a motion to refer, I assume, a motion to refer to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee.
And would it be, Chair Sims, that we would need to table, B49?
If we
Or-
would refer, you can, let me pull the book out. So you can make a motion to refer, which I believe, let's try and remember. You can refer a matter, which I believe closes debate. Let me find out.
Wait, are you okay? Are you okay with?
I was just gonna say, just for the ease of writing this motion, Chair Sims, if we could, just change it to an amendment, motion to amend, motion B49, be it resolved that, the words be it resolved that the executive policy be approved, be rewritten to be it resolved that the board refer the executive policy to the Constitution Policy Review Committee.
It does, I just checked, and it is possible if we refer the motion, if we refer the matter, then we do not have to postpone. So we can simply make a motion, to refer to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee. I would probably recommend that we include some of our observations, an explanation why. That does not have to be included in the motion. That should be written afterwards. And I will include our concerns or our questions. With that, Director O'Leary and I both sit on the Constitution and Policy Review Committee. We will take those concerns to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee. Yeah, but it can be referred and then it does not have to be postponed. President Lettieri.
Wait, never mind.
Okay. All right, so Director Harris, just to be totally clear, you are moving the motion to refer B49 to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee. Be it resolved that the board refer B49 to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee, moved by yourself. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Director Matthews. All right, is there any debate on the motion at hand? As I said before, if you have any questions or concerns, you can just email them to myself or Director O'Leary, and we will discuss those when we take them to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee. So hearing no items for debate, we can move into voting procedure. Again, this is the motion to refer the Constitution to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee. Motion B49. Be it resolved that the board refer B49 to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee, moved by Director Harris, seconded by Director Matthews. All those in favor, can you please raise your hands? That appears to be unanimous. All right, perfect. Moving on to item 13.2, the motion to approve the Cusa Committee's policy. B50 now. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I've got my little printout here and all the motion numbers are wrong. So I totally understand what you mean, Simon. All right.
Just a point of order.
Go ahead.
Chair Sims, this is an issue on my end. The appendix that is attached to the meeting agenda is incorrect. I'm actually going to go in really quickly if it is okay at your request, that I just switch out the link.
Absolutely. Sure.
Well, then, yeah, the Vice President here got to send me that anytime fashion.
I think that we can, I have not yet read the motion, so you can, I will permit changing the appendix to the correct one without an amendment. I believe for everyone else, I did share this Cusa Committee's policy with everyone, did I not? Or no, I didn't. Well done, great.
I have access to it, so I will.
All right. I should now have just sent, oh no, it sends a request to the owner.
Give me a
Just
second.
making a copy.
Okay. My sincere apologies. Give me 1 second. There you go. There we go. That
All
should
right.
be-
We have, oh, better. I guess I should refresh my page. So am I correct in assuming that the link is now correct?
That is correct.
Perfect. It's still not corrected on what I'm using, but that's all right. So we have a motion moved by myself and seconded by President Stoikos Latiri to approve the Cusa Committee's policy G04. Whereas Cusa Council passed the Cusa Committee's policies G04 at the first regular meeting, Cusa Council meeting on May 30th, 2022. And whereas the Cusa Board of Directors, along with Cusa Council, has been designated as a joint competent chamber for the Cusa Committee's policy G04, in part due to the board's regulatory functions, be it resolved that the Cusa Committee's policy G04 be approved by the Board of Directors as written. As it is my motion, I'm going to take the opportunity to speak to it. Actually, this is probably going to be very similar to the executive policy we just discussed. I actually have several notes, some concerns that I would like to see dealt with. If there are other people who, if there's other directors who have concerns, I'd be appreciative if you mention that you have them, and we may be advised to do the same thing, refer it back to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee, now that there are directors who sit on that committee. Director Harris.
Yes, I was going to comment on that, probably for the same reason that you're thinking of. I'm specifically looking at section 21D. Joint board and council standing committees shall include all human resources committees. This is if passed, would be a violation of the bylaws, first of all. And second of all, again, privacy wise, would be a huge issue if Cusa Council had access to human resources issues that we have been privy to because of our standing as directors. So for that reason alone, should be referred back to the CPRC.
Yeah.
Obviously there's more, but that alone stands as a reason to refer it back.
I think, yeah, because I think we're also talking about the compensation.
I actually fault myself for that. That was me who put section D in the Cusa committee's policy because that was before the board. Yes, I see, Sam, you're nodding your head. Yeah, that's my fault. And it's something that never got changed when the board was created. So
So,
you can all blame me. But is there any more discussion on this? It sounds like, Director Harris, would you be willing to move a motion to refer this?
yes,
Go ahead.
motion to refer the Constitution and Policy Committee, B-50A, be it resolved, that the board refer B-50 to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee. So essentially the exact same motion that we wrote. The only difference is I just changed the numbers. So.
Yeah.
I will move that.
All right, so we now have a new motion on the floor, which is the motion to refer to this motion to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee. Do we have a seconder for the motion to refer? Director Huggins Charles seconds. All right. So I will read the motion. We have a motion moved by Director Harris, seconded by Director Huggins Charles, to refer this motion, B49 or B50 rather, to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee. Be it resolved that the board refer B50 to the Constitution and Policy Review Committee. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, we can move into voting procedures. All those in favor of referring, if you can raise your hands. All righty. Perfect. That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item 13.3. The motion to approve the long-term strategic plan policy O-01. This is a motion moved by President Lettieri and seconded by myself. Whereas the Cusa Board of Directors passed motion B31, a motion to adopt a long-term strategic plan for Cusa during the third meeting of the Cusa Board. And whereas motion B-31 directed the President, Vice President Internal, and Director of Student Development to research the long-term strategic plans of other student associations to present to the Board and Council at their regular August meetings. And whereas motion B31 directed the President, the Vice President Internal, and Director of Student Development to draft a procedure for creating the long-term strategic plan to present to the Board and Council at their regular August meetings. And whereas the Cusa Board of Directors, along with Cusa Council, has been designated as a joint competent chamber for long-term planning processes and agenda setting for the organization. Be it resolved that the long-term strategic plan policy O-01 and its respective schedules be approved by the Board of Directors as written. There is an appendix attached. President Lettieri, would you like to speak to this? No? All right.
Well, other than it's just a general, I'll speak to it. It's a very general plan for the plan. And it outlines all the people that we identified, or all of these staff, volunteers, et cetera, that we identified as being necessary to sit on the committee, to have, various perspectives and opinions from all the different areas of the association. And in terms of like planning, long-term strategic plan, planning for this association will involve numerous different departments, and we'll need to address numerous different needs. And then we also, I know that we brought this up in the last meeting about finding goals. And like there's already some listed in here, but it also calls for this committee to draft or like for their first action item to be kind of creating goals for the long-term strategic plan anyways. So yeah, that's
Fabulous. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the motion?
I'll speak to it.
Go ahead.
I promised Gabe I would speak to it, so I get to channel Gabe a bit at this meeting. I believe Gabe supports it on the whole. I think the one thing he's worried about is that it was a minimum for a 5-year length for the plan. And Gabe mentioned that oftentimes is beyond the generation of the student, that, you know, a lot of times it's 4 years, more and more 5 years as time's going by. And he wanted to see it reduced to a minimum 4-year plan. That's just a comment from Gabe on the whole. I support it as it's written.
President Lettieri.
We like actually brought it down to 5 years from like 10 years. So I don't think anybody who wrote it will be happy with it being brought down. It was an argument just to get it down to 5.
And what
And
what is the general, are most other long-term strategic plans 5 years or more?
5 years or more. That's why like we didn't go further any further below 5.
At this point, if anyone would like to make a motion to amend, that would be in order. Seeing none. I had a question about the composition. There seems to be a lot of board members on there, which is perfectly fine. Do we want to balance that out with a couple of extra counselors? President Lettieri?
So the reason for this is that when we were most of the other institutions did not have any council representation, and the reason for that is because the board is designated to be working on strategic planning, strategic strategy, that area. And oftentimes, and the reason for that, in my opinion, is because the board serves sort of, neutral. It's not political, so it can't affect a long-term strategic policy or plan politically, whereas councilors could. So that was just but we did include. And we did include some councilors because of that concern. But
Fabulous.
everyone needs to be equal now.
Perfect. The other question, and this is, I'm perfectly, goes a motorcycle. The other question, and this is up to members of the board, whether you'd like to have the chair and the vice chair and 2 other directors, or whether you'd simply like to have 4 directors. I'm quite happy to sit on the committee, but it's up to you. Maybe more than 4 of you would like to sit. So unless it's conventional to have a chair of the board, I wouldn't make the amendment. I'm just interested to know why it was written that way.
That is conventional.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. That satisfies my my curiosity. Are there any other questions? If there's no more questions, no more debate, I believe we can move into voting procedure. I'm keeping in mind that it's only 7:30 here and I have a ton of energy. So we have a motion moved by President Lettieri and seconded by myself to approve the long-term strategic plan policy O-01. Whereas the Cusa Board of Directors passed motion B31, a motion to adopt a long-term strategic plan for Cusa during the 3rd meeting of the Cusa Board. And whereas board motion B31 directed the President, Vice President Internal, and the Director of Student Development to research the long-term strategic plans of other associations and to present to the Board and Council at the regular August meetings. And whereas B31 directed the President, Vice President Internal, and Director of Student Development to draft a procedure for creating the long-term strategic plan to present to Board and Council at the regular August meetings. And whereas the Cusa Board of Directors, along with Cusa Council, has been designated as a joint competent chamber for long-term planning processes and agenda setting for the organization. Be it resolved that the long-term strategic plan policy O-01 and its respective schedules be approved by the Board of Directors as written. All those in favor, if you can raise your hands.
Wait,
Oh, go ahead.
the question's been called, so, yeah, so never mind.
All those in favor, if you can raise your hands. That is unanimous. Fabulous. Moving on to 13.4, the motion to amend the hiring policy and procedure.
Right. Do we need to fill the 2, or do we have that on here?
We do not have a motion to fill the committee. We would like to
We do not have a motion to fill the committee.
Will we can, may I suggest then, Mr. Chair, or sorry, Chair Sims, on your request that we put that as B65 to fill the committee, and then come back to that at a later time.
That would be sure, that would be in order at the end of new business, so long as the board agrees to deliberate. Yeah. Alrighty. So item 13.4, the motion to amend the hiring policy and procedure. This is moved by President Lettieri and seconded by Director Harris. Whereas the HR and finance assistant position has been created, be it resolved that the HR and finance assistant positions be added to QP 3011 level of employees. Be it also resolved that the hiring panel for the HR and finance assistant position shall consist of Q. The hiring panel for the HR and finance assistant shall consist of 1 director of finance and administration, 2 one other finance staff as designated by the director of finance and administration, 3 president CEO or vice president finance secretary treasurer, 4 one other senior staff member as designated by the director of finance and administration. Be it further resolved that all applicable clerical edits be made throughout the policy where applicable. Be it further resolved that any references to the director of human resources and the director of finance be amended to director of finance and administration. Be it further resolved that sections 5B and 5C be removed from the policy and be replaced with B. The hiring panel for the director of finance and administration shall consist of 1 executive director, 2 president CEO, 3 vice president internal or delegate, 4 chair of the Cusa board, and 5 one Cusa board member if willing. Be it further resolved that all references to the executive director and hiring panel membership be amended to executive director or designate for the following employee categories: class 1, QP 3011, and class 3. Would anyone like to speak to this motion?
Does anybody want me to? It's technically my motion. It's very clerical in nature.
Sure, go ahead.
It's just, like I say, it's just a very clerical motion to update the existing policies that we have and to add the HR and finance assistant.
Director of Finance and Administration.
I have a question concerning the second part, 5B, I think it is. The hiring panel for the Director of Finance and Administration shall consist of the Executive Director, President, CEO, Vice President, Internal or Delegate, Chair of the Cusa Board, and 1 Cusa Board member if willing. I'm just curious as to know why the Vice President Internal is included in that panel rather than the Vice President Finance.
Director of Student Development.
Yeah, I guess all I can do is give you the historical context. And when we were creating the hiring policy, we tried to make it so that every executive position was on a hiring panel. I can't speak to how we did up specifically with this one here. I know we have the VP Internal on the Director of Human Resources and VP Finance on the Director of Finance, but that might just be, this might be residual from that.
I can also speak slightly to the thinking of that was, given the role of the VPIs in policy and the connection with HR and a number of the policies that we have at an operational level, I think that was also part of the rationale, but again, also not, I mean, seeing as technically I wrote the motion, although that amendment I didn't make. I mean, saying VPI or VPF and or VPF might make sense as an amendment.
I would be willing to entertain a motion to amend that section. Would anyone like to make that motion?
It's simply number 3 of the hiring panel.
Yeah.
Say VPI internal and or VP finance.
Instead of at or
I would be.
Or delegate, yeah.
I would be willing to make that motion, actually. a motion to amend, B 52, that the text or delegate be struck and replaced with or vice president finance. Do we have a seconder for that? It's President Lettieri. All right, we have a motion on the table now, moved by myself, seconded by President Lettieri, to amend the main motion, B 52, and strike the text or delegate and replace with or vice president finance. Do we have any discussion or deliberation on that motion? Seeing none, I think we can do this by unanimous consent. Are there any opposed to the amendment? Seeing none, we can make the amendment and that wording will be changed. The other thing I am a bit concerned about with the main motion, the first be it also resolved, that's technically an amendment to the hiring policy. Although I suppose technically the entire motion is, so that doesn't matter. Never mind. I think that's fine. Is there any further discussion on this motion, B 52, as on the motion as amended? I will go through and amend. All right. Seeing none, I wish that title was shorter. Would the board like me to read the motion through, or can I just call the question?
Call the question.
Hearing none. So we have a motion to amend the hiring policy and procedure, motion B 52, that has been moved by President Stoikos Lettieri and seconded by Director Harris. All those in favor, if you can please raise your hands. That appears to be unanimous. So that's the motion, not the amendment that's passing. So we move on to 13.5. It feels like deja vu. It's a motion to amend the hiring policy and procedure. Now motion B 53. Whereas the IT administrator position has been created, be it resolved that the IT administrator position be added to class 3 level of employees. Be it further resolved that the following sections be inserted into section 7 of the hiring policy and procedure. H, IT administrator, subsection I, the hiring panel for the HR and this is, should this simply read IT administrator?
Yeah, it was just written incorrectly.
Okay.
That's a clarity.
I literally just, yeah, we're not amending this. It's just.
No, if it's a clerical error, I believe we can just, and I hadn't read it yet. Sub I, the hiring panel for the IT administrator, I can't spell, shall consist of 1, the executive director or designate, 2, director of student services, 3, director of communication and strategy or designate, and 4, 1 executive member, specifically the president, CEO, or VP. That's moved by President Stoikos Lettieri and seconded by myself. Do we have any debate on the motion? I think that's the executive director.
Yeah, the only non-debate, the first thing I was gonna say is everybody clear as to why this is a class 3 level employee, not part of a union? Is everybody like clear on why this wouldn't be a union position? Essentially, it's just the access to information and sensitive data that an IT administrator might have would put them in a position that would preclude them from being able to wholesomely participate in that, in the union, and therefore it doesn't make sense To have the same, very much the same reason why senior management would not be part of a staffing union. And the only other slight, again, this would be clerical, director of student services or designate, probably as well. Those are the only two things, just for clarity, so people know why it's not a union position, and if we should add director of student services or designate as well. Yeah.
I would be happy to entertain that. I think we could do that on unanimous consent. We're getting late enough in the evening.
Otherwise, I have nothing
Is
else to
there
add.
is there any opposition to adding the text or designate to the motion under sub 2 so that it would read director of student services or designate? Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, that amendment passes. Is there any further debate or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we can move into voting procedure. The motion is moved by President Stoikos-Lettieri, seconded by myself. Whereas the IT administrator position has been created, be it resolved that the IT administrator position be added to class 3 level of employees. Be it further resolved that the following sections be inserted into section 7 of the hiring policy and procedures, sub H, IT administrator, paragraph I, the hiring panel for the IT administrator shall consist of 1 executive director or designate, 2, the director of student services or designate, 3, the director of communications and strategy or designate, and 1 executive member, either the president, CEO, or a vice president. All those in favor? If you can raise your hands. That motion passes unanimously. My goodness. Only 11 more to go. How's everybody feeling?
I didn't think they were.
Oh, I haven't eaten.
How's everybody feeling it? Good. It's 7:30 my time. I've got tons of energy. All right, moving on to item 13.6. We've got a motion moved by President Stoikos-Lettieri, seconded by Director Harris, to amend the operating budget. Whereas Cusa has created a senior leadership team, class 2, that consists of the executive director, director of finance and administration, director of communications and strategy, director of student services, and director of student development to meet the evolving needs of the organization. And whereas a primary function of the senior leadership team is to ensure long-term operational effectiveness, consistency, and continuity, Cusa recognizes the importance of ensuring ongoing support and professional development for this team. Be it resolved that the executive director operational budget include an annually renewed professional development fund specifically for the senior management team in the amount of $25,000. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak to this motion? Executive Director.
It's kind of funny, isn't it?
No.
It's not. No, it's not.
What, the hand?
The way that you're holding your hand is not.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't mean to. I just want to be noticed. Just for context, this was part of the original discussion that I brought to the table in terms of the amalgamation of the director of finance and HR positions into one, and then recognizing the need for the assistant position, which is one area which we were going to spend some of the additional kind of funds. And then the second request I had made at that time was that some of the monies be allocated specifically for professional development of the senior staff, because technically speaking, right now, we don't have anything. So there's a variety of different things that I think would be beneficial to not only the staff involved, but most importantly, the organization. The goal, by the way, I should say, was that a portion of the funds would be dedicated to team professional development, and a portion of the funds would be dedicated to individual professional development across the 5.
Perfect. Is there any further debate or discussion on this? Hearing none, I think we can move into, oh, go ahead, President Lettieri.
That the executive director's operational budget, or what's the executive director operational budget?
So I have section within the budget.
Yeah,
And so I'm asking for this to be added to my budget,
oh, I see.
so I can so it's
Oh, I
managed,
see, oh,
right?
sorry, sorry, confused about that, thank you.
It has to reside somewhere, right?
Sorry.
Director of Finance and Administration.
Just to echo what Dustin has said, yes, there is a department that is designated as the operational department, and that is where this would reside under the jurisdiction of the executive director and the president CEO.
The main reason why I'm also bringing it to the attention is because there are certain things that we would like to start to action. And obviously, we don't need to get into it, but like the previous, so we'd like to be able to create the funds so we can start using it, essentially. That's the idea.
Perfect. All right, if there is no more discussion on this, I believe we can move into voting procedure. So we have a motion moved by President Soikos-Lettieri, seconded by Director Harris to amend the operating budget. Do you want me to read the motion? No. Director of Finance and Administration.
Sorry, I have a question concerning the language used, annually renewed. So does that mean if unused funds will be carried over into the next fiscal year, or will it be topped up to the amount of 25,000? So just some clarification around the annually renewed portion of the or the language rather. For clarity, is it a top up? Is it a carry forward of unused funds into the next fiscal year, or is it something that's lost within a fiscal year if not used and then renewed to the max 25,000 in future fiscal years?
Differently, how am I supposed to do this? The Queen? I'll do the Queen. How about the Queen?
Executive Director, His Royal Highness Dustin Rivers.
Yeah, no. Okay, bad choice. I won't use the Queen right now. We're avoiding Hitler, we're avoiding the Queen. Okay, so anyway, we're getting silly, but further to Tim's point, I think it's actually a very good point that I hadn't thought of. My preference would obviously be that it's a carry forward versus a top up. So any unused funds, we would have the ability to plan perhaps from one year to the next for an initiative that might be a little bit more expensive. It would allow for long-term planning for certain things that might be opportunities.
Does that language need to be included now, or could that simply be included when the budget is created? I assume that when the final budget is created, that all that language would be included, and that this is just to start a professional development fund. Am I correct in assuming that?
We can make a future motion to answer this specific question at another date. Yes.
Okay. Or I'm sure it can be included in the budget. So is there need to answer that question now? I guess.
The only thing I bring up is that if it is a reoccurring carry over to the next fiscal year, it creates a liability situation with the unused funds being carried over indefinitely. So some clarity around the annual renewed, because renew means usually top up. So I just want the language to be clear so that it does actually mean a carryover year over year of any unused funds into the next fiscal, if that's the intention. But the word renewed means that it's being if it's $25,000 allocated 1 year and we use 15,000, then it gets renewed back to 25,000 in the next budget cycle. I just want clarity on that so that it's not there is no potential for a growing liability if there is unused funds in that line.
Executive Director?
Yeah, can I maybe make an easy amendment suggestion? Further be it resolved that any carry forward would be approved on or would be discussed on a case-by-case basis at such time a request is made. So it is a renewed fund, so top up, but if we wanted to carry something forward intentionally for another initiative, that we would have the flexibility to present that carry forward to the board and ask for that carry forward versus making it a permanent fixture, right? And keeping it at a top up for now to address the liability concern, which is very valid. You know what I mean?
So I would be willing to make that motion if Dustin, you would be willing to restate your motion.
Sure. Be it further
Restate your
resolved,
amendment, rather.
be it further resolved that any remaining funds would be carried over upon request during the yearly budget cycle. Otherwise, this fund would be topped up upon renewal. Is that why, Lily?
All right, so I will, so that's a motion to amend. Be it motion to amend the main motion and add, so I guess motion to insert, be it further resolved that any remaining funds would be carried over upon request during the yearly budget cycle. Otherwise, this fund would be topped up upon renewable. Is that quite correct?
Sounds familiar?
Upon renewal, correct?
Renewal, not renewal, or with an A, you mean, yeah, sure.
Renewal. All right.
Yeah.
Be it further resolved that any remaining funds would be carried over upon request during the yearly budget cycle. Otherwise, this fund would be topped up upon renewal. That is moved by me. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Director Huggins Charles. And I believe we can, is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, we can do this with unanimous consent. Are there any opposed to the amendment? Hearing no opposition, we have now amended the motion to amend the operating budget, motion B54. The motion now includes the text, be it further resolved that any remaining funds would be carried over upon request during the yearly budget cycle. Otherwise, this fund would be topped up upon renewal. Is there any further debate or discussion on this motion? This motion as amended. Is that signal, Dustin?
Yeah.
Yes, Executive Director.
No, sorry, no, I wasn't asking
Oh.
for the floor.
All right.
My apologies. I gotta get the hand gestures down.
All right. Well, we can move into voting procedure. I'm assuming you don't want me to read the motion as amended. But I have.
Any motions as amended going this far going forward.
Pardon?
We don't want you to read any of the motions as amended going forward.
All right, perfect. So we have the motion to amend the operating budget, B54, moved by President Stoikos Lettieri, seconded by Director Harris. All those in favor, can you please raise your hands? That appears to be unanimous vote. So maybe now we're at 11 left. Anyway, the motion, item 13.7, motion to approve the key holder policy, number O-04. Whereas the Cusa Board of Directors passed motion B41, a motion to direct the Vice President Internal and the Executive Director to draft a Cusa key holder policy during the third meeting of the Cusa Board. And whereas the Vice President Internal and the Executive Director have drafted policy O-04, a policy respecting key holder policy for consideration and approval by the Cusa Board, be it resolved that the Cusa Board of Directors adopt the key holders policy as written. That's moved by President Stoikos Latiri and seconded by myself. Is there any debate or discussion on this item? Hearing none, we're just assuming that Davin and Dustin have done their jobs well. I did have a read over it, looked good to me. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, and all the relevant, it's been sent to all the relevant people who would be affected.
Were
by the
Henry's
policy.
comments taken into account?
Were they sent to that?
They were put into the document.
Yes.
Okay. I'm assuming.
I mean, that is-
All right.
Except for the northern Michigan.
All right. If there is no further debate or discussion on this, I have just recently read the motion, so I'm not going to read it again. We have the motion to approve the key holder policy O-04, moved by President Latiri, seconded by myself. All those in favor, can you please raise your hands?
No, wait, this is
Oh.
actually, sorry, this. Can somebody open the policy and tell me? Who's last
We-
edited
12 days ago,
by Henry,
yes.
Okay. No, he was the last one I was aware of.
but so nobody's reviewed since.
Nobody's reviewed since Henry made his efforts.
Okay, can you once again defer this motion?
Pardon?
Can we once again defer this motion?
Can we defer this one?
Yes.
Are you requesting that we move to defer? Or to postpone, rather?
Postpone to the next board meeting.
Sure. So we have a motion to postpone from President Stoikos Latiri. Motion to postpone until the next board meeting?
Yeah.
All right. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Director Huggins Charles. Is there any debate or discussion on this motion to postpone? Hearing none, we have a motion moved by President Latiri, seconded by Director Huggins Charles to postpone motion B55 until the next board meeting. All those in favor, can you please raise your hands? That motion passes unanimously. All right. This is the motion to approve the mandate letter to the Executive Composition Committee, 13.8. It's a long one. Motion to approve the mandate letter to the Executive Composition Committee. Whereas it is desirable for the jurisdiction and competence of the executive positions to be assessed and reorganized as is logical and are reflective of changing realities. And whereas many executive positions have or seem to have confusingly overlapping or contradictory competence. And whereas the board resolved to constitute an advisory body to investigate the composition and duties of the executive. And whereas the Vice President Internal was so directed by the board to draft a mandate letter for the same, be it resolved that there shall be a commission according to sections 33 to 43 of the committee's policy called the Executive Competence and Composition Commission. Be it further resolved that the nominating committee for commissioners shall consist of the Vice President Internal, the Speaker or Deputy Speaker of Council, the Chair or Vice Chair of the Board, one councillor, and one director selected by lottery sortition, and the Director of Student Development non-voting. Be it further resolved that the nominating committee give its recommended nominees to council at or before the September council meeting following a public job posting on all relevant association social media sites. Be it further resolved that the attached shall serve as the mandate letter for this commission. And that is Appendix 1. Is there any debate or discussion on this? This is something that the board asked for last time, looking into terms of references and those such things. Director Harris.
Yes, Chair Sims, I would just like to suggest that, this is, I hope that you can entertain that we add something at the end of this meeting, for how long this is going to go, to strike and fill the committee.
So there is no striking and filling of this one. We would strike it at the end of it, and then by striking it, there would be the nominating committee, which would then nominate commissioners.
Sure.
Which, trust me, makes things extremely confusing. I don't know why there's a nominating committee. I actually,
Where is it?
pardon me?
Sorry, never mind.
I don't actually know why there's a nominating committee. Does anybody know why there is a nominating committee on this and it's not just by standard nominating procedures?
What an amazing question. And I'm actually going to kind of raise a point to that. If this is something that's going through a nominating committee at the council level, considering that this is a joint piece and we are striking this board, I don't understand why we can't. Why we aren't being given power in this terms of, or in this mandate letter to fill our own board of directors members.
But Savin just drafted this, so why can't we just amend it?
We could simply amend it.
Yeah,
Okay, well then, motion to amend, and strike that these commissioners shall be elected by council following a public posting and review from the nominating committee.
That's in the mandate letter.
Yeah. It's like on the first page, it doesn't have any numbers, so I don't.
Okay. And then otherwise commissions are filled by the board that, or by the relevant chamber. So we have a motion to strike the words, these commissioners shall be elected by council following a public posting and review from a nominating committee. We will also have to, just so you know, President Lettieri, have to strike the same wording from the motion. Oh, I think, Lily, I think we're just striking this, aren't we? We're not striking that they're going to be elected by council or the commissioners be elected by council, are we? Okay, can I get a refresher what exactly you want to strike, President Lettieri?
Commissioners shall be elected by council following a public posting.
Oh, it is that section.
No, that can stay. These commissioners shall be elected by council, period.
I think, there we go. Following a public.
Commissioners shall be elected by council and or the board where applicable. I don't know, however to make it say that the director is elected by the board and the councilor elected by council. But also then there's a student at large, there's 3 students at large, so is that from council?
They would need to be elected by the, I think that's why there's a nominating committee, because it's a joint committee. This would be more easily, written at a later date, so that we're not keeping everybody late. Unless this is urgent, I would suggest that Can I
just like ask a question? Like, is everyone available tomorrow night?
Who knows?
Like, we're at the limit of what we can take.
Yeah, like I heard a few people say that it's going over their heads, so potentially.
I was going to say, actually, when we finish this motion, that we're getting now to 11 o'clock, which is sort of our it's not actually written in board rules of procedure, but we could adjourn this meeting if no one is opposed. We will, however, have to find a time to reconvene.
The thing is that I'm away for 2 weeks starting next week.
Would you be able to join virtually from somewhere?
Okay.
Or I mean, at this point, we have maybe an hour left, so.
That's theirs.
Okay, so are we thinking of deferring this motion as well, this mandate as well? I would say, like, who's the nominating committee? Who's on the nominating committee?
It's in the motion.
It is in the motion. And then
Where?
one of us would be one director would be selected by lottery. Simon and I will have to debate over who gets to sit on the committee. And then the nominating committee will accept nominations.
Oh my God.
Oh, it's in the motion.
It's extremely complicated. I would suggest it's 11 o'clock. I think we're all losing steam. I would suggest that we adjourn. And I will send out a when is good poll, and we will find out when the best time for everyone to reconvene is. Perhaps next week, perhaps the last week in August. We might even, unless anything is urgent, we could even reconvene until the first week in September.
Because the thing is too, we're planning an emergency meeting for September as well.
So
So would we be able to add items to this agenda if we get there? Where are
let's at this point adjourn.
we? Listen. We actually have like, the rest are very clerical. Like, I genuinely believe that we can get through the rest in half an hour, genuinely.
Oh wait,
And most of them are ones that were recommended by committees.
in that case,
And most of them are directing somebody to do something.
Would- go ahead.
For the benefit of everyone here, can we use a vote on whether or not we want to extend this meeting? I am fine to stay. I don't want to make a decision. I don't know if it's possible to suggest it passes on a 2/3 vote.
How's that? Sorry.
If it can pass on a 2/3 vote. Great, if we can continue with this meeting, only because of how late it is, and I want to make sure that every single director in the state with quorum can.
It would be in order, even though it's not in our rules of procedure. I would be willing to entertain actually a supermajority vote to make sure that everybody's willing to stay on. So
There are actually motions that we need to pass, so like, if we need to pass a few of the motions before we like. Anyways, sure, go ahead.
let me just. The motion to adjourn is simply a majority vote. So we can simply call a motion to adjourn at this point, and if we get a majority, we will adjourn. Would that be to your liking, Vice Chair Harris?
Sure.
Would you'd like to call a motion to adjourn? Sure. I could even call a recess for another day, but at that point we'd need a time. So actually no, I can call a recess and say that this meeting is recessed, and we will find a date within the next 2 weeks that works for everyone. If directors are willing. So I will actually have a vote on the motion to recess. I won't just unanimously call it, just to make sure that that's what everyone feels. So I would like to move to recess. All in favor, if you can please raise your hands. All right, that's 4. The chair votes in the affirmative. 4 is a majority anyway. The chair votes in the affirmative. This meeting is now recessed. I will contact you tomorrow with a when is good poll over the next 2 weeks, and we will find a time to reconvene.
Like, are we able to put a board meeting on the weekend or something? Like, can we please do this on before Monday, because I won't be here for 2 weeks after Monday.
We can find a time. Yep. I'm sure we can find a time within the next week that'll work for everyone.
Until Monday, okay, cool.
All right. As I say, yeah, if anyone happens to be available tomorrow evening, that would be good. I know I'm supposed to be moving cows, so.
Are you
My-
sending a when is good tonight, Greg?
I will send the when is good. I'm gonna go home. My mother is potentially still in Kamloops because she's locked herself out of the truck. So I have to figure out what's happening with that. I will send it at my earliest convenience either tonight or tomorrow.
That's okay.
I'm also. I'm working out.
I work at BC when I know you're finished. It's funny because you're off.
We need one finance employee and we could do it for.